Today we're going to talk a little bit. About glazing. So, for our purposes, a glaze, just in general, is it's your color, but with some oil or other medium added to it. And typically, in old master speak, a glaze would be like it would be warmer because your shadows are warmer. So if your glaze is made out of something dark, like typically it's like your oil plus like a dark transparent color, or a semi-transparent color, or more transparent than not anyway, then what we're really talking about is something that's going to you're going to see through, and then for our purposes it's a dark that's going to unify an area. So I'm going to pick an area here, and I'm going to pick this little spot right here as it transitions. And as you can see, between, even in the camera here, like this is softer, this transition from this dark on this edge here over, and then in here it's a little stark, it's more stark, like, you know, the planes are built correctly, but we want to give this soft transition over. Does everybody see that that's
Yes.
darker and softer? Okay, so if I'm just using paint, like, it has the consistency of like toothpaste, just about. But if I add my medium to it, I have some medium down here, some oil, just some linseed oil. And what I'm doing here is I'm making this kind of soupy. It gets a little soupier. Do you see how as I brush, you can kind of see through it? How thick you make your glaze is really kind of up to you. But typically, in the beginning stage where you don't have a lot of glazes on this, you're going to make it a little meatier, meaning there's going to be more paint in there. So what I'm going to do here is, what the purpose of the glaze is it's almost like with charcoal, like when you do veiling over an area to kind of make this soft transition over it. Your glaze is going to be like, I'm going to put the glaze over the whole thing. And that's a little heavy. So what I might do is I could actually remove some of this from my brush. Here's a paper towel. Yeah, that's good. So what I can do is even just pick the paper towel off. And now if I go back and I finagle that a little bit, I can actually play with that glaze a little bit. All right, do you see how I'm working that in now? Now if I just remove that a little bit with my finger, with the paper towel, with the dry brush, I mean, now I've effectively just did that and kind of unified like a whole area with it. So you don't want to go too thin with this because it'll get a little bit
Drippy.
yeah, a little mealy. Like, you don't want like a too thin a paint film. But what I can do now is I can go back in and I can softly kind of play with that area a little bit. So if I use like something a little stickier as a medium, something with a little stand oil in it, or something that has like a little bit of that tacky quality, as I go back and I paint in it, it'll pull on the brush, and you can get these nice kind of delicious kind of marks, you know, in your paint film. So if I go back in and I paint into this now I have something to paint into, and I've created this effect really quickly. Does that make sense? So really quickly you can get something to turn. You pretty much have to do it on a dry area. You can't, and obviously, well, before I go any further, I would transition this in. If this were me doing this, for me, you want to transition that into your other environment. So it has to be, the area has to be dry. So you can't do it if it's wet. But what it allows you to do is, like areas like this, if this were popping up too much, I could maybe do a little glaze and rub in there a little bit across the whole area, and then even transition it up into the halftone. If there was some, let's say this was a red cloth, if I was to, and it was bouncing light back up into the eggs, I could put a really thin layer of red on there, rather than trying to mix this exact color of red, you know. And this would be for a separate video with color, because this is obviously no color in here. But this is the thing it does, is it unifies things really quickly. If I see these little areas up here that have this dark in there, I would be glazing these little through passages just to pull together your shadows. And it's really quick. You can do it really quickly. And you don't need a lot of oil on there. You would just be softly rubbing this in. And you could almost do it with transparent paint, but I'm saying you can put oil in. And the thinner and less, and the more you go in your painting and the more delicate it is, the more oil is in there. Because think about how light that would be, the less oil is in there, or the less paint is in there. More oil, less paint means you can put it on really thinly and it'll change your value. But now it's really, really subtle.
Question.
Sure.
If you were glazing between these two, the really dark and the light,
Okay.
how would you approach that? Just like, let's say you were glazing the outside. You're just concentrating on the dark part.
Correct. The glaze is for the dark. For the lights, if you were to do something in the whites or the lights, the whole light patch in general, that'd be a different thing. A white with, like a white or a light color with oil is called a scumble, and that's for a separate discussion. But it's the opposite of a glaze. Typically, a scumble is a neutral or a coolish color with white. And again, this is based on old master ideas that if it was there's indoor lighting and you're painting somebody, that the light is going to be cool, and your shadow is going to be warm, and that's kind of the way that system got set up. But in general, a scumble is lighter color with white in a light area, or lighter color white, Naples yellow, whatever, in a light area. Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.